Almost a year ago, I traded my Linux laptop in for a MacBook Pro. I've never used macOS prior to this, and transitioning has been both interesting and at times frustrating. When I bought my MacBook, I decided to splurge a little bit and I got a higher spec M4 Pro chip. It's got 14 CPU cores, 20 GPU cores, 24 gigabytes of RAM, and a terabyte SSD. The biggest thing that surprised me when I got my MacBook was just how good the build quality is. Its aluminum chassis came in a space black color, which I think looks pretty good even though it picks up fingerprints pretty easily. The screen looks great, it gets plenty bright. The keyboard feels okay, and I'll talk about that in a second. The speakers blew me away. The speakers, I've always heard that MacBook speakers have good sound, but I didn't really know until I tried it myself. And I'm not gonna say it was like, I don't know, bookshelf speakers or something like that, but for the size that this sound was coming from, it's quite impressive. I've been told the 16-inch MacBook Pro has even better sound, but the 14-inch speakers don't leave me wanting for anything more. Another thing that surprised me, and I definitely can't go back after this, is the glass trackpad. The trackpad is smooth, it's large, the Force Touch click is so much better than the traditional click where you click at the bottom of the trackpad. It's better than any trackpad I've ever owned in any other laptop. MagSafe is pretty convenient at times, but to be honest, I usually just charge my MacBook when I'm docked at home through USB-C. And the MacBook's got good enough battery life that I don't really need to charge it when I'm on the go. The battery life in the MacBook is fantastic. It lasts me all day. I'm able to stuff it in my backpack, come back the next day, and it usually lasts me for another round or two. If I'm doing heavier workloads, then yeah, I'll have to break out my MagSafe charger or something like that. But to be honest, I've just been charging it at home when I'm docked to my monitor because it's been a full desktop replacement for me. I've got a big gaming PC over here, puts out a lot of heat, it's pretty expensive, and I don't use it. I've been using my MacBook as my main everything computer since I got it. It's powerful enough that it's actually better in some situations than my gaming computer. While it certainly has a lot of pros going for it, there are a few things that I kind of miss. The laptop I had before, I was running Fedora Linux on an Asus ZenBook 14X OLED. It had a 13th gen Intel i7 chip, 16 gigabytes of RAM. I put in a terabyte SSD, so it wasn't lacking in specs. It was, however, not as good in build quality, definitely compared to the MacBook. However, the screen, the OLED screen, I have to admit, I kind of miss it. The MacBook has this great ProMotion Liquid Retina XDR 9000 14-inch panel on it. It gets plenty bright. In outdoor conditions, it can even reach 1000 nits, which has come in handy in occasions. The OLED that I had in my last laptop, I don't know if you can beat the OLED in terms of contrast, deep blacks. I like the look of the MacBook screen, but in comparison with my last OLED, it's a little bit washed out. Perhaps people prefer that. Perhaps that's better for color accuracy. I don't know. I'm not a color scientist. I just like looking at it more. That's not to say that this MacBook screen is bad in any way. I'm just comparing the two because the ZenBook that I bought, I got at Best Buy for $750. This was a good deal, especially at the time. The MacBook I bought, if you didn't know, costs $2,400. I paid $2,400 for this MacBook. Insane amount of money for a laptop, most I've ever spent on a computer, bar none. You may be wondering why I decided to switch from Linux. If I had such a nice laptop for such a good price, why would I switch to macOS when I had kind of a good thing going for me? Well, to be honest, Linux was kind of annoying me. I've been using Linux for at least the last 5 or 6 years. I started distro hopping around in 2019. I found one I liked, Fedora, in 2020, and I've been using that since. I changed between GNOME and then later KDE Plasma. I kind of like KDE a little bit more for the customization. This is not for everybody. For example, Linux has come a long way, but I would not put Linux on a computer I'm giving to a friend or on my parents' home computer for them to use. It's good, but it's still just in the day-to-day, you do come across occasions where you need to get a little bit technical. I was kind of getting sick of having to solve these problems over and over. At one point, I just kind of wanted to work on what I wanted to work on the problem I wanted to solve, instead of trying to fix every other little thing that Linux was throwing my way. That led me to two options. I could go back to Windows, which would mean going back to Windows updates, privacy concerns, a UX and UI that overall just disagrees with me, or I could try out macOS. macOS being kind of a walled garden that you have to buy a pretty expensive ticket to enter, that being the MacBook. Although I'll get into this in a little bit, prices for MacBooks at the entry level are quite good. They're best deal in tech in my opinion, but I'll get to that in a sec. Were I to go with Windows, I was afraid that I would be giving up what I most liked about Linux, which was the command line. I know Windows has WSL, but I still wasn't very enthusiastic about the prospect of moving my entire development workflow over there. Rather, Linux being a Unix-like operating system is much more similar to what macOS offers. macOS comes with a terminal right out of the box. You can enter it and use many of the same commands that you can in Linux. So the transition was a lot more seamless. When I started using macOS, it felt so nice to just have a UI that in my opinion looks nice and at the very minimum is at least consistent. I have to run Windows for some of the games that I play, so it's on my gaming PC, and getting into some of the system settings, you go through like 3 different design styles of dialog boxes. It's insane. At least macOS is fairly consistent, and in my opinion actually nice to look at. And macOS comes with a lot of creature comforts that I didn't realize I would like so much. For example, I recently bought some AirPods. Being able to switch between my phone and my MacBook seamlessly without having to worry about switching between, turning off Bluetooth and then turning on and then going back and forth. It's so easy to switch between the two. I can now send text messages from my desktop. I can look at my photos. I can, see the Find My app. All this stuff is possible in other operating systems. It's just not first-class citizens like it's treated in macOS. So for that reason, if you have an iPhone, the Apple's ecosystem is kind of hard to escape. Second of all, I was very, very interested in the hardware aspect of what Apple had been offering. I've been watching them since they started with Apple Silicon back in 2020 with the M1s. Very excited that they moved to ARM. It was kind of never an option for me because I knew how poorly Intel Macs ran. It ran often hot and the battery would die fairly quickly. But I've heard nothing but good things about these M1s since they came out, the M chips at least. Beyond that, I've been hearing a lot of praise for the performance of the M4 Pro. And I have to say, it is remarkable that I can get so much out of this laptop in such a small form factor. I can edit video, develop software, even game. Cyberpunk 2077 runs on my Mac. It's actually insane how much juice is packed into this little guy. Now, all that said, macOS has not been perfect. It's not so much to do with bugs as it is to do with why did they do it that way? It just feels like I keep having to fix little minor details that bug me that should be an option but aren't. And I keep having to fix them with third-party apps. I've gotten to the point where I don't have to worry about it anymore, but figuring out which apps to download to fix those have been kind of frustrating. So a quick little highlight reel for anybody interested. I would very much recommend better display, especially if you're using a third-party monitor that's not Apple branded, because Apple does something weird with high DPI on non-Apple monitors. It just looks awful. Sensible side buttons, because for whatever reason my Logitech mouse wasn't doing the back button in Safari, but was in other places. I don't know what that was about. And then just some others. I would recommend Al Dente. It's great for stopping your battery from overcharging. I set it to 80% max, so when it's on my dock, I'm not going to 100% battery life every single time. The thing I miss most in macOS that I had in Linux is a decent package manager. Apple does have Homebrew as kind of like a third-party option. Homebrew's great. Homebrew has come in clutch several times for me. but I just don't like it as much as like DNF or apt in Ubuntu, for example. It just doesn't feel as well integrated. I don't like having to type in cask every time I want to download an app. I occasionally download the command line tool instead of the app, and then I don't know what happened because I forgot to put cask. I've got one last complaint. That's it. It is perhaps the biggest gripe I've got with macOS, and that is how macOS handles spaces. It drives me nuts. I like having, I've always had in Windows, Linux, beautiful virtual desktops, and they are virtual desktops. I have separate apps that are running separately. macOS doesn't do this. By default, the apps that are running in another space, if you click it in the dock, it'll bring you to that space. It doesn't open another app in the space you're already in. You can disable this, but clicking on the app now just does nothing. And then if you click it again, it does the same thing by bringing you into another space. Very annoying. Some people have suggested going into the accessibility settings and enabling the setting to reduce animations. So when you go between spaces, it appears to be faster. It doesn't actually change the speed. You still have to wait for it. It just now doesn't have an animation. Completely ridiculous. In the end, a laptop is only but a tool. In the time I've owned this laptop, I've used it for advanced level computer science courses. I've developed some of my own little games in C and C++. I've ran several LLMs locally, like GPT's most recent 20 billion parameter model runs great through Olama on my MacBook. I've even gamed on it, like I mentioned before, although I kind of reserve that still for my gaming PC. Half the time spent on this laptop is on the go. I'm usually out and about, and then the other half is docked here at home. This has been a game changer. Being able to have a powerful desktop when I'm here, and then a powerful computer with me when I go, and maintaining the work that I'm working on without having to change anything. I just pack it up here, I open it up wherever I'm at, and boom, right back where I was. Same app's open. Don't have to worry about booting up the computer or figuring out what I was doing. Super convenient. Now, is it worth it? Am I glad that I spent so much money on this laptop? To be honest, I get my work done with fewer hiccups and in less time with this MacBook than I have with any laptop I've ever had before. Does this make it worth it? That'll be up to you individually. However, I would suggest re-examining your use case because Apple offers some very good value products at the lower end of the MacBook spectrum. For example, I've seen the M2 MacBook Air and the M4 MacBook Air for going as little as $700 and $800 respectively. And now these have the upgraded 16 gigabytes of RAM, which eliminated my major gripe that I had with the Air lineup. Increasing the RAM has really increased the value of these laptops. My brother actually has the 15-inch MacBook Air, M2, 16 gigabytes, and I'm kind of jealous sometimes. The extra inch of screen real estate would not be unwelcomed. The thinness and lightness of it is kind of appealing because the MacBook Pro, even though I've been saying it's pretty small, it's pretty thick. It's kind of heavy. And you do feel that in the back when you've been carrying your backpack around all day. For 99% of the work I do, I don't think my MacBook would do any better than a MacBook Air with an M4 chip. The M4 chip is really good for the price that you're paying. I would recommend that you take a look at just how much power you actually need and kind of base your decision off of that. Because it's very possible that a 13-inch or 15-inch MacBook Air would do you just fine. The 15-inch MacBook Air is going for $1,000 right now, $200 off. That's less than half the price that I paid for my MacBook. For a laptop that covers probably 95 to 99% of the use case. I personally don't think I could go back to a 60 Hz display, and that's the only gripe I've got with the Air lineup now, besides maybe the low storage that it comes with, but you know, you can't have everything. I would recommend in a heartbeat the M4 MacBook Air, you know, going for $800 to anybody going to school. I would recommend it to a friend, to a family member. It's a great value. And if you're looking for a desktop, the M4 Mac Mini, super small, super cute, fits on your desk, $500 when it's on sale. Costco, Best Buy, whatever. You can find it for pretty cheap. If Apple were to offer an Air with a higher refresh rate screen though, I would have a very difficult decision to make were I in the market. I am glad that I purchased my MacBook at the time I did. It's been extremely useful for me. Were I able to go back and change my mind on buying this MacBook, I don't think I would.